what at the time might feel like overreaction, even though it's not, but it will seem to people like it is because there's nothing overtly obvious going on in the community or the hospital yet. And that's a really uncomfortable step. And it takes really brave people to do that.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Stokely, an opportunity for you to now sit back, connect, listen, learn and evolve through the art of conversation. So today I get to introduce you to a friend of mine called Anne-Marie Madden. Anne-Marie is an anaesthetist based out of BC in Canada, and she's also a wicked badass ultra runner. So Anne-Marie is currently in some pretty intense times at work, being in the COVID-19 era. And so it's really interesting to get her perspective on what's going on in a fair bit of detail. And then we also get to chat about her life-enhancing enjoyment that she gets out of running and out of being an athlete and what that all means to her. It's pretty nice just to have a really honest and open chat with a good friend, and I really hope that you can all take something from it, because there certainly is some takeaways which I really enjoyed listening to and just hearing from Anne-Marie, because she's a great person. She's obviously an incredible professional in her daytime job, and that obviously translates to her skills and honest commitment to her running as well. We get to chat a little bit about, the stress that we can face and how that really relates to our physical state and our being, and how we can also manage that. And I think one other topic that we touch on that's really, really important is how do we empower people to get into the outdoors and into the environment. And I just want to thank Anne-Marie for taking the time to have a chat. And it was in between her work shift when she was actually meant to be going to a race. So I really appreciate that, Anne-Marie, and I really hope you're doing well. I hope everyone else out there is doing well too. And of course, I do want to take a moment, as always, to pay respects to the traditional custodians upon the lands which this podcast was created. And I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. So I hope you enjoy the episode, and I'm really stoked to be able to introduce you to Anne-Marie, and I really hope you get something out of it. So enjoy.
But don't you apply that to everything in life? Like just not really caring what anyone else thinks?
I wish I didn't care what other people think. And I think that's something to strive for in general. But there are definitely times when I do care. I mean, I care that my patients think I care about them, or that my colleagues think I put a lot of energy and care into my work. And I suppose at the end of the day, if you do and no one else notices or is aware, then that is okay. But I guess you always worry that if other people didn't agree with you, is it because you had a misconception about yourself? Are they correct? Or are you correct? I don't know. Because I think part of growing and learning and moving through life is being self-assured to try new things, to work hard, to take some chances, but then also be open to change and open to feedback. And so if you never listen to what subtle or overt suggestions or comments or ideas people might put forth to you, then maybe you would have less opportunity for change, even though probably most of the time it has to come from within. Sometimes that change, I think, is sparked by what other people might say or do, or how they interpret you as a person or your work or behavior.
Yeah, I think totally we can use all of those other elements as kind of like tools to help us along the way. I think it's so interesting because I know you I know you from like a different walk of life from kind of the professional side of Anne-Marie. I mean, don't get me wrong, you are a professional at your ability to be an athlete and to be a rad person on that running side of life. And then there's this Anne-Marie on the work and professional side of life. And I don't think a lot of people know that about you because, you intentionally do kind of keep that separate most of the time. But what is the other side of your life look like
Yeah,
besides
I mean,
the
we only hang out on holiday, which or my holiday.
Anne-Marie is wicked on holiday. She's the best.
Yeah, I'm making up for the other 11 months of the year. Um, yeah, I think even at work, I would say I can be very polar in my behavior. In that I can have fun, or I can be fairly jovial when it's a non-stressful situation. And I love my other colleagues, the anesthesiologists, surgeons, nurses, cleaning staff, like everyone at the hospital. I feel like I can be on a very friendly social basis with, but I can also be very, very serious. And there's quite a serious side to me when sort of shit's hitting the fan, or just when it's a really critical scenario with a patient. I'm pretty quick to kind of shut down with the chit chat or the niceties, and just make sure that we're all on task and being giving the best care that we can. As a newer, younger attending, I try to be aware of what learners that now work with me might be feeling, because having just been a med student, a resident, or a fellow, you still kind of remember how much the attending you work with can make or break your day, or how you feel, or how you think your progression as a learner is going. And I don't really know what they think of me. I think some days I'm pretty friendly and easygoing, but I'm also very particular about how I do things, and I haven't quite reached that point where I can let people do it their way if I'm worried that that's not the safest way or the best way. So I'm still fairly strict, I would say, sometimes, at least at work.
So let me just get this right. So if someone is attending, they are, say, like shadowing you or following you throughout a day to learn the ropes?
Yeah, like if I'm the attending anesthesiologist, I'm the one in charge, but you may have a resident or a medical student working with you that day because they're learning how to perform that profession. And there's like a medical student, everything will be very, very new to them, and you have to essentially walk them through every step, and you're there the whole time. And then a very senior resident might be 2 months away from going out to work on their own. So that individual, ideally you try to give them as much autonomy as possible while still being a bit of a safety net present if they need help, or if they reach out for some guidance. And sometimes, you'll try and leave the room so that they can learn to make some of the hard decisions themselves. And no two anesthesiologists have the same level of comfort. Some are very hands off, some are very hands on their entire career. It's kind of a variable practice. It's individual, I think, to each person as to how comfortable they get with learners, and also how much confidence you have in that individual learner.
How was it going from being a resident where you were learning a lot to then, like, for yourself personally, kind of creating your own identity as, I don't even want to say it because I'm going to stuff it up, anesthesiologist?
Yeah, good job. Yeah, anesthesiologist. The first time I went from a resident to an anesthesiologist would have been probably about 2.5 years ago. And I started working as a general anesthesiologist. And surprisingly, I found that transition pretty smooth. In terms of our residency in British Columbia had prepared me very, very well. We had lots of time in the operating room. So we'd worked a lot, and we'd also had very rigorous exams that just having to do all that book learning prepared us well. And so I worked for a year, and then I actually went back to from a staff back to a learner position and moved to California. And did a fellowship in cardiac anesthesia, and then did that for a year. And then when I came back this kind of August, September, or last, I guess, 2019, I found that transition more challenging than the very first time, just because now the cases were a lot bigger. The surgeries were really major. It's more common that, really sick people come in, or that we're having cardiac arrests or things like that. So the acuity of the care was more intense, and I think that to me felt like a bigger transition than the very first one. But now that I've been there for, sort of 7 or 8 months, and you get to really know the surgical team, and you have a good relationship with everyone on the team, you start to understand people. And it's amazing how much, you go through decades of learning, and you think what really matters at the end of the day to keep someone safe or do a good job is like the book knowledge. And that's actually very minor. It's managing people, managing yourself. That is the most important part in operating rooms and probably anywhere in the hospital. So getting to know like which type of personalities need to be reined in a little, or which ones sort of need encouragement, and all the different people in the room, and how do we as a team work the best, is important to keep in mind. And hopefully as you work with those same people, the better you kind of understand the dynamics, and the more trust builds up between everyone on the team. So that's why a lot of simulations that we do when we're practicing running through emergencies, similar to how pilots do simulating crashes or trying to land an airplane when some of their instruments have gone or one engine's not working. We do the same thing in medicine, but working on cardiac or any type of emergency. And I used to always think that it was about the secret, like what was wrong with that specific patient and how do you treat the rare thing that's happening to them. But the more you do those, the more you realize it's not about those small details. It's about the people, and when to actually call something an emergency. Some people will have the inclination to wait too long because they're worried, or they don't want to have drama. They don't want to press the button on the wall that will have like a flood of 30 people come into the room to help, and others call it right away. So there's not always a right or wrong, but you can start to understand your patterns and what part of your patterns are really good and really safe, and which ones you could probably work on, and understanding how those parts of the puzzle fit with the other people that you're working with.
Mate, that sounds incredible. And are you happy with where you're at in that space? Do you learn something every day? Do you take on the challenges with a different facade at work than you do when you come home? Is it like that must be a very, very tough environment to manage on a personal level?
I mean, I really do love my job, and I love the team that I work with. And I'd say 60% of the time I'm pretty good at like having the day, and then I go to the change room, take my scrubs off, put my, running gear on, and jog home and leave it at work. But there's still a lot of percentage of the time, especially when I'm working the weeks in the intensive care, where you're still sort of on call for that. So you go home, but if something cropped up at work that they needed help with, you might go back overnight. And I definitely do think about like the really sick patients that when you left, you're kind of leaving a plan to get them through the night, but you're never really sure if that's going to work or if something would change. So something for myself, which is like, it's been very constant all through my learning process, is that I need to work on not always taking it home, and having the ability to hand over to whoever's working the night shift that night and explain to them what you think's going on and what the plan is, and be reassured that if it's something out of their comfort zone, they'll call you back, and not just sit at home worrying, because it's like not sustainable to do that, right? Because you have to get up again the next morning and go back in. And so, there have been times when I left with a bad feeling, you're just not sure that someone's going to turn around or whatever. And then sure enough, at midnight, I'll get a phone call. And it's like, no, you got to come back in. We have to go back to the operating room or whatever. It's just not looking like it's going to turnaround. But I think, yeah, even over a few months, I'm getting a bit better at that. But it's a learning process, and it's a personality type too. Some people are very good at disconnecting, and others for their entire career till they're 75 never will. But I think one way to get around that is to make sure that even the people on your team who maybe don't work in that area as much, but have to manage that on the night shifts, that we do lots of rounds or learning as a department so that everyone feels comfortable at least managing the initial stages of some of these emergencies while I'm maybe driving back in or something like that. So that it makes it raises everyone's game, if we teach, bring everyone's comfort in those specific areas to the next level. And that's one of the benefits of working at an academic hospital, where we have lots of interest and opportunity to kind of constantly learn and be lifelong learners. And if you hate learning, you probably don't want to do this profession, because you will truly learn something every single day. And it's not always a fact, but it could be less tangible, but equally important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I did engineering at university, and it's just incredible when you get out into the workforce and you spend hours and hours in an office, in a project office, you go on site. It's so much more of what you really need to know, and what you need to do day to day, and how you need to act. It's got nothing to do with the textbook and all those all the facts that you learn, and the equations and things like that. It's just, it's got so much more to do with those, like you say, kind of those intangible things that you learn, which quite often comes back to people and
yeah.
understanding how to communicate with people and different people, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I mean, I can resonate on that for sure. What I wanted to touch on actually is because we're living in a different world right now, and I don't know if I'd be interested to hear, with the current situation the world is in with this coronavirus and COVID-19. Have you guys ever discussed something like this, or ever been prepared for something like this in your workspace, in your profession? Because this is a different world, and you're right on the front line, which is, I think on behalf of everyone, we want to say thank you for just being there. You and your colleagues are the people that are the ones that are dealing with this in the most, confronting way, or, you're right at the coalface, and that's deserves some incredible kudos and appreciation from everyone, I think.
Yeah, I think for most people at home, this is, a really, really strange time. And I would say at work, the most important thing really was that hospitals, more as an entity, had to take the virus seriously. And also, for that to happen, I think there had to be government support. And we were very, very lucky. So in terms of our prime minister, and then also Bonnie Henry, who, I live in British Columbia, which is a province in Canada. She's been phenomenal in terms of recognizing very early that this was an issue, and agreeing when all the physicians and nurses and everyone in hospitals wanted to make changes early on to prepare for this, because we'd seen what happened in China. It was already happening in Italy. And the most important thing you can do is try and reduce the number of cases that your center is going to see at a single point in time. Because some of these patients, if they get COVID, probably no matter how you treat them, will not be able to survive. Some will do well and not even need hospitalization. Thankfully, the majority of people don't. But if the proportion of people who need critical care and could survive overwhelms your ability to provide critical care, then people are dying who don't really actually have to die. And so that's why here, we started physical or social isolation or whatever. There's different terminology in all the different places around the world, but we started that at a good time because we're on the Pacific coast. We'd had some fairly early cases, but they were a very small number. They were easily traceable to travel. And that it's only a matter of time before that becomes just widespread within the community and no longer simply, you're married to someone who traveled for work or came back from a country with a high infection rate. So we stopped doing elective surgeries fairly early on. We had some amazing people in our department, Dr. Shannon Lockhart, who she has an interest in simulation, and she right away picked up on this being a big issue. And we started doing simulations. She was developing, like on a day-to-day basis, she was having people try different sort of outfits, you could call them, or protective equipment on, and she'd see we'd spray ourselves with this glow-in-the-dark aerosol, or it was more like droplet liquid. And then you'd see after you took your equipment off, like, your neck would glow blue, or these types of things. So we were seeing where the resin would land, even with the equipment on. Myself and one of the other physicians, we were practicing it as the very first people. And over the week, she had changed what we wore so drastically in efforts to protect us. And then the issue became, okay, so how do we actually order enough of this stuff? Because we're not the only ones who are going to need it. Everywhere around the world, people are going to have to, protect themselves with this equipment. And we ordered it very early on. We were thankful to have her and have the support of our department head and the hospital. And it did take, before things really get crazy, there's always going to be some skepticism that is all of this like excessive? Is it really necessary? But when you're seeing what's happening in other countries, it'd be foolish to think it can't happen to yours. So you just have to make that uncomfortable step to what at the time might feel like overreaction, even though it's not. But it will seem to people like it is, because there's nothing overtly obvious going on in the community or the hospital yet. And that's a really uncomfortable step. And it takes really brave people to do that. And whether that's your prime minister or your president or the hospital management or the department head or individual people to really push for it, it's super important. And thankfully we had the right people, at least in our department, doing that for us. But it doesn't mean that you're still not having to put breathing tubes in sick people or deal with them on a daily basis when they arrive, but at least you feel as well prepared as possible for it.
That's an incredible position to be in. So when you're getting that kind of confirmation that this is going to in the future be a really serious thing that you're going to have to deal with, how did that feel when you were like when you were finishing work and you were going back out into the world outside of the hospital? Did you see a lot of people that were dismissing it as being overreacting and things like that? And how was that to deal with every day?
I'd say for the most part, the majority of people in Vancouver and British Columbia have been amazing. And I think the reason we had some early cases, but we've actually been very fortunate with the shape of our curve has been actually quite flat. And that's because people did listen, and, we made changes on as early as possible, or at least reasonably early. But there's still a cohort of people, I think, that, don't necessarily believe. And I remember, I think this was probably 3 weeks ago now, I'd worked the day shift at the hospital, and I'd run in, and I was just really tired, and it was 8:30 p.m. and usually I'd run home, and I was just like, I just don't feel like running home. I'm really tired, and we don't have a vehicle right now. And so I couldn't just call Hamish and have him pick me up. So I thought, well, I'll take the bus, or I'll stand at the bus stop. When the bus comes, if it's empty or at least fairly quiet, I'll get on. I won't touch anything. And then I'll just catch the bus home. And it's a single bus that will get me fairly close to my house. So I stood at the bus stop. The bus shows up. There was like 2 other people on it. You were only allowed to get in the back door. And so I thought, like, okay, you get on the back door. They've made the bus free, so you don't even have to pay. You don't have to touch money, nothing. Um, and I was sitting there. There was no one around me. There was two other people at the back of the bus and the bus driver up at the front in an area that you couldn't go near to try and keep them safe. And then the bus went over one bridge, and then all of a sudden it starts to drive by the beach. And it was just after sunset. So, everyone, I guess, who'd been out watching the sunset decided to get on the bus. And the next 3 bus stops was full of people. I have to say they were all very young, like, I don't know, in their 20s. They were vaping at the bus stop. They had 6-packs under their arms. And then within 5 minutes, I was now on a fairly full bus of people who seemed to have no comprehension of what it meant to be socially isolating or the consequences of having that many people on public transit. Really, you're supposed to reserve it for people who have to get around for work, because not everyone's going to own a car, not everyone's going to have the ability to drive themselves in a single vehicle. And so I was very frustrated that night. I didn't say anything, and I recognized, I was wearing my spandex because I was wearing the clothes I would usually run home in. And so if I'd started to give everyone a lecture, I would have just looked like some weird woman who'd gone out for a run and decided to get on a bus, and not, like someone who'd just left the hospital and had an accurate understanding of what we were dealing with. So I just kind of felt frustrated and didn't say anything. But I don't think I've taken the bus since then.
Yeah, I mean, it's there's every scale. Like, there's extremes in all of the countries around the world at the moment. I think, some people are really just still to this day not really flinching due to what's going on, and some people are really, getting very, very concerned and almost like a little bit, I don't want to say over the top, because there's reasons for precaution and things like that. Like, there's that point where you can do everything practical that's going to prevent this thing spreading and prevent people from falling ill that are in close proximity to you. And then there's that point where those practical steps then turn into this like overarching and over controlling anxiety, where people are just like so concerned about catching it that, you could run past someone on the trail and they like run 5 meters away from you and like look at you like you're a weirdo and like you're covered in coronavirus. And it's like, hang on a second, let's kind of be very cautious about this, and at the same time, let's like not get controlled by what is going to happen if it does get out of control.
It's really hard for each person to strike that balance between taking it, adequately seriously, but then not spending all their time worrying or panicking about it. And especially for people who don't necessarily work in medicine, or this is something really foreign to them, I can completely understand why some people would find it terrifying. And especially, anyone can get it, but we do know that certain individuals have higher risk factors. And so there are people out there who are in the highest risk age category, in the highest risk for medical comorbidities, and they have every right to be completely terrified of getting it. And at least those people take the recommendation seriously and tend to do what's needed to be done to keep the spread at a population level down.
Have you been actively kind of not looking at the news a lot and media right now? How does that play into it?
Well, I don't have a television. I listen to the radio, and then because I'm in Canada, so I listen to, it's all Canadian. It's like the CBC, which is our Canadian news station. And then I sort of have like 2 very divided Twitter feeds. I have like my social kind of running one, and then I have my medical Twitter feed. So I'm scrolling that one a lot during the day, because you'll see all the newest published articles, like the scientific papers that are coming out on a daily basis. I mean, people are publishing faster than we ever have before. They're reviewing articles extremely quickly, just because this is really important to share the information that we have from China or Italy as soon as possible, if you can help other countries who are now in the thick of it. And then also, of course, on that, I'll see little clips that, because a lot of these doctors will be American, will have clipped their news feed that's their president saying something extremely infuriating. So I catch little snippets of American news, but really it's not entirely whole. And every morning I tend to listen to the New York Times podcast, like the Daily. So that's always going to be a show that at the moment is revolving around COVID for the most part, because it's such a kind of relevant or hot topic. But I wouldn't say I really have a good understanding for what each country's news is feeding them.
Okay. There's a lot going on in that space. So how does Anne-Marie have mini holidays during her week? Because as you said before, I only know Anne-Marie when she's on holiday, and she's a radical person, and I'm sure she's a radical person at work. It was actually on our most recent holiday. We've had a lot of holidays lately together, Anne-Marie. Our most recent holiday was at New Zealand, but prior to that, our other most recent holiday. So we were on this awesome little adventure called Bus Run Bus, and we were on that adventure because we've got a good friend called Ricky Gates that dreamed up this idea that you should hop on a bus with 27 or so strangers.
Yeah, I think like 26. I don't know if that included you, me, Ricky, and Max. Like, I'm not totally sure.
Yeah.
I don't actually know how many people were on there. We lost a few people. Some people left.
It's so funny because there was never a number.
No, you never really knew.
We never really knew, but because we always just kind of counted the guests or the participants of the bus, and we never counted ourselves. So there was always this like, it's kind of between like 30 and 25 kind of.
Yeah. And then there was the drivers.
Oh yeah. And the drivers, did we count them? Don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. And then the Irishman who joined us for one evening.
And we tried to get him on for the rest of the day, and he didn't want to.
No, he didn't want to join us.
Didn't want a bar of it. Then there was a lot of like ghosts on the bus as well. A lot of ghosts that were there from leftover trips. So anyway, we started in San Francisco. In the end, we drove 2,000 miles, which I don't know what that is in kilometers, and but I'm sure
multiplied by 1.6.
Oh, here we go. All right, Anne-Marie, let's do it. I knew
I don't
that.
know, 3,200 or 33 or something like that.
I did know that. Okay, I know the maths. Jeez. So we went and visited all these amazing places along the way. So we went to the Grand Canyon. We went to Zion. We didn't run there, but we went there.
Yosemite.
Went to Yosemite, Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Mount
Charleston, that
was cool. Big Sur as well.
Yeah, that was nice.
So this was an incredible holiday, and I guess what I'm going with this is like you have this incredible profession where you're obviously extremely dedicated to for a large majority of a life, and then you also not the ability, but you also have the commitment and determination to be an incredible runner and an incredible athlete as well, and you also carry around with you an incredible like sense of joy when you're doing the running side of things. And it's so awesome to see because you really like bring up the motivation in any kind of group setting, which is awesome. So like why?
I was worried I was too serious when running.
Oh, gee. Yeah. Well, I mean, there has been moments but we won't go there. So, Tell me how running became is it your go-to, or is there another secret life outside of those other two secret lives that we already don't know about? But is running your go-to for creating some space, and is that something that you really do love in many ways?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I absolutely love running. Like I don't know how to explain it, but it's the sport that's always just been so joyful to do, whether I'm running an easy run or, doing a hard workout. Like I truly love it. And I was chatting with Hillary Spires on a different podcast, and we were talking about how I never actually ran like for, say, the high school cross country team, or I didn't do university cross country running. And I said I kind of wish I'd had maybe a more formal running background. And she said, "Oh, but then maybe you wouldn't love it as much as you do now." I was like, "No, I can guarantee you, no matter how I ran, like at any point in my life, I would still love it, because it's just, maybe I wouldn't love certain structured types of workout or something like that, but in some shape or form, I would love running, because it's just gets you out there, gets you freedom, and it takes you to amazing places, and it keeps your body, provided you can stay uninjured, even if you're running just like simple running during the week, a few days a week, or jogging to work or cycling to work or whatever. If you can keep your fitness to a level where then you get a holiday or you get some time off, and your life isn't so full of work or whatever other things impair people from doing kind of what their heart truly desires all the time, you have that base, so you can then go hike up some mountain or something like that with the reasonable confidence that physically you can do it. So there's just so many benefits to picking the sport you love the most and finding time to do that, because that's what it'll keep you fit and energized and young at heart, I think.
So did you find running, or did running find you? What's the story there?
I think probably it was like high school. We had to run a mile, but we didn't have a track at the high school. So it was a strange figure eight loop, like around 2 blocks, or sort of like around the fields on cement. And we had to do that. And it was like, wasn't till grade 10, or I'm not sure, grade 9, but I was a teenager by then. And I biked around a lot, and I took care of horses. So I'd cycle to the stables, but I didn't run. And then I did the mile, and it was, I don't know, it was just kind of somehow fun and easy. And then I think after that, just started running on my own. And then I got a husky dog. So then I just take the dog out for runs all the time. And I mean, the trails near my house are not super rugged trails. They're beautiful, and they're fairly urban. But as a teenager, I just go in there and kind of run as often as possible with the dog.
So, because there's a long way from running a mile in high school to then becoming a competitive athlete at distances like 80 kilometers and 100 kilometers, all within learning to become an anesthesiologist, and then so like you must have been pretty set that you wanted to go in that direction, or was it more like a natural flow that you kind of adopted?
I think it was a natural flow, but I don't know. I think the first time I did a true race would have just been like a 5K. I think we were doing as a charity, because a family friend's child had sadly died from sudden and infant death syndrome, and then there was a charity run for it. So our whole family and all of our friends did it, and it was 5K. And this is probably like 3 weeks after I'd run that first mile in high school or something. And I started out walking with them, and then I was like, oh, they're going to do this all as a walk. So I started running it. And then that was the first time I was like, oh, I can run 5 kilometers. Like I ran the whole thing. And, that morning before we started, that seemed almost impossible. Like, are we even going to be able to walk this whole thing? And then I started doing some really simple, low key, really grassroots kind of events that they had on the North Shore, which is our mountains here. And then those, because I was like, there's no one there. There's like 35 people. And so I'd usually win. And I think I was 15, 16, 17 when I was doing these. And there were some women, but there weren't actually that many women. There certainly weren't many women. There wasn't any other girls my age. And it's definitely been an evolution. When you look at the sport now, it's wonderful to see that there's now you go to a race, there could be 300, 3,000 people at the start line. And we're moving more and more towards having, 50% women entrants. And I know the stats show that at least at the moment, the longer the distance is, the lower we're seeing, like it's not going to be 50% women yet, but hopefully that's an evolution that will eventually come. And I think that's just the lack of confidence or support, I think, for younger women when they're running. I mean, I was lucky that it was sort of something that obviously was physiologically easier for me when I started, and that, in the PE class, I was one of the faster girls, or when they combined us with the boys class, I remember still there was like 2 other guys that I would race against, and yes, they'd usually beat me, but I could also run faster than a lot of the guys in the class. And that was sort of a motivating factor to, if I'm going to be totally honest, I liked showing them that a girl could run faster than them if she was determined to. I feel a bit embarrassed admitting to that, but it was, kind of a, don't just assume you can beat me because you're a boy and I'm a girl and we're in a mixed PE class kind of thing.
Totally. I mean, I think, far out, that's just society's stupid kind of opinion over what can and can't be done, and applying different labels to that. Like, you're a girl and you're a boy, so, you can only do this and you can only do that. And if you don't do that, well, then you're kind of breaking the laws of this bullshit that we've made up because, I don't know, we're bored to make up anything else. I think it says a lot about the sports progression, and also you speak very passionately about that, and it sounds like you really do want to see, almost like a 50-50 split with women and men in the sport. If you could really instigate an initiative, or if you could really put something together that would bridge that gap and that would get more women and young women into the sport of running, or any sport really, like what do you think would work, and what do you think you would put out there?
I think, well, there's a lot of ways you could go about it. I think firstly, you need really positive people in places and positions that have a huge impact. So when you look at high schools or even elementary schools or coaches, you need to have people who are encouraging of not only the really fast athletes, because that tends to be, like I'd consider myself someone who probably got more encouragement than a person who maybe liked running, but they weren't right at the front of the pack. And so some of those people might have gotten forgotten or sort of left out of the cross country team or whatever other things happened. But maybe that person's going to go crush 100 milers in 15 years, and you're going to find out that they have like a uncanny or like an incredible talent for endurance, or they just love it, so they just keep doing it. So they, put in the time, and even that statement I just made makes it seem like how well you do is a metric of how deserving you are to do it, which actually is totally false. But if that person loves it, no matter where they finish, if it's enhancing their life, whether they are fast or are slow, then they should be out there, right? Because it's giving them a feeling of satisfaction. It's creating a community for them to do training runs with. And I mean, time and again, you meet people who felt like they never really found their people or their community until they moved somewhere and started trail running, and all of a sudden a huge network of people that they felt like were like-minded and had similar interests and priorities popped up, and created a group of people who've become their best friends. And that's not specific necessarily to the trail community. I know people will find that in all sorts of sports, but obviously you and I spend most of our time running if we're doing a sport. So, that's what I think of. But I think we need to continue to expose people to all sorts of different things as young as possible, and then encourage them to keep doing it, especially if they really love something. I don't know about you, but I get asked all the time by people who swear they hate running how they can run more. And I'll say, well, first of all, is there another thing that you really love doing? Because it sounds like you're wanting to be more active. that's usually where it's coming from, is the person wants to do more exercise in their life. And then they think of running. So they'll ask me how to run more. But it's like, but if you really enjoy something else, well, then spend the time doing that. And if there's nothing that you like in the first place, you can think of starting with running. Okay, then we could, find a way for you to run more. But there's nothing to say that you have to choose running as your sport. Just choose something you adore.
Yeah, absolutely. I echo that for sure. I think, it's interesting that you bring that up, because certainly I do get asked that a lot. People come up and they're like, I tried to start running, or I think I want to get into running. And absolutely, I don't want to say it's not for everyone, because I really do think it is for everyone. Like, you should just go out and go for a run. But you are right in that we are pretty lucky these days with our ability to really try our hand at any kind of sport. We can really, have a curiosity about something, and more often than not, we could probably find a way to try it out, and test the waters and see what it's like. And then if that sparks joy, then just go with it, but definitely don't be made to feel like running is the go-to because someone else is doing it, or someone else gets something from it. You've really got to look within and then find out what it is that's going to give you that joy that goes far beyond being able to say, oh, I run, and I can do this distance, and I can do it in this time. They're all just kind of metrics that at the end of the day don't really mean anything if you're not getting that deep sense of, I guess, freedom and enjoyment from simply moving in that motion outdoors or even on a treadmill, and then I think the one thing I said this the other day with a friend, is the most common thing I ever say to people that have questions about running and want to know how to get into it. So often I'm always just saying, look, just go and try it and just slow down. Like, more often than not, you're probably just running too fast. And that's why I just hate it. Like, I feel it just hurts so much, and I feel like I can't breathe and things. And it's like, you've just got to slow down. Like, there's never a pace that's too slow. You can just slow down a little bit, please. Like, go easy on yourself.
I totally agree. And when I think back to, even when I started running with the dog, I only knew one speed, which was the speed we were supposed to run the mile at. And I'd run that for as long as I could till I couldn't run anymore. And I had no concept of easy running for probably another 5 years or something. Like I didn't know that you could run at different paces. It was just, I thought running was all out. And even now, if people are, they're like, oh, you said, well, I'm doing an easy run if you want to meet up or something. Obviously not right now in the COVID era, but, people, oh, I could never run with you. Like, you run too fast. And it's like, okay, so what pace are you thinking of when you think you're going to go for a run? And they'll say some pace, which is way faster than what I would run my easy run at. It's like, no, if you're going to run with me, you're going to have to slow it down, actually, because I'm easy to, I'm barely moving. It's really slow. And so, also people haven't had the chance to learn about training, so they don't know about speed work and easy runs and tempos. There's all sorts of different paces and different objectives of each workout, and sometimes it's just go in the forest and run at whatever speed you just feel like running at that day. And sometimes it's slower than I'm supposed to, and sometimes you just, this is not that often, but you're supposed to go for an easy run and all of a sudden you just feel amazing and you're just taking off, right? Your legs just don't want to stop. I wish that happened every time, but that's not really the case. There's a lot of slogging out there too, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did read an article the other day, and it was about the gentleman that went over to Kenya and was training with the Kenyans, and he was just so blown away by their recovery days, their easy jogging days. Some of them are just shuffling at 9 minutes a mile, which is 8 minutes a kilometer, and it's totally cruising. There's no emphasis on any kind of pace or anything. It's just this, if that is what you naturally feel like moving at, then that's totally fine. Just roll with it. So yeah, I just want to emphasize that, it's just like this, and there's no speed that that makes you a runner. It's like,
no.
There's no like, as soon as you start to run at this pace, then you can call yourself a runner. It's like,
no, I mean, I'm sure there is some definition, right? Like both, you have 1 foot off the ground or something where, you'd be disqualified if you were a race walker. So I think that's the rule. You would be disqualified as a race walker for whatever you're doing. You're a runner.
Maybe that's the way we can start to encourage people, is just try race walking. And because
break the rules, go race walking and then break the rules.
And that's the starting point. And then I reckon thousands more people would come to the sport of running if we started to introduce it like that. Maybe that's the key. Maybe we start up a race walking club where we break the rules.
A badass race walking club. Yeah,
that's it. The race walking
leather
clubs.
jacket. That'll be like heat training too.
Yeah. Badass race walkers. That's what we're called. Brilliant.
Yeah,
we've done it. Anne-Marie, how do you spoke about it before with work, like you finish a shift, you get changed, you put on your running clothes, you leave work at work, and then you run home. Like, you're a competitive athlete in this sport. How do you also do that with running? And say you do go out for a workout, but you may not hit that feeling that you want or that pace that you want, or on the other end of that is like, how do you finish a race and achieve a result that you really weren't stoked on? And how do you create that separation so it doesn't infiltrate into the following weeks or months of your life?
I mean, I've probably been running for almost 20 years now. And it's when I look at how much my idea of training or racing has changed, it's pretty fascinating, from going from having no idea how to train to when I first started actually racing with the intent of having, I'm going to run a 5K and I'm going to run it in 19 minutes, or, I had these very set goals. And at the beginning, I don't know how I picked these numbers, but I'd pick a number, and if I didn't hit it, it like ruined my day. You'd be like sitting there at the end, maybe you went and did it with a bunch of friends, and everyone's talking about what happened that made them not hit their pace times or whatever. And then one day I just all of a sudden said, I think I was listening to another friend who spoke exactly sort of as I did. And it was just so negative, and yet we'd had reasonable races. Like, we'd all just had fun, gone for a run. And I said, like, okay, that's it. You will never be the Debbie Downer anymore. Like, no more Debbie Downer. And it was like a concrete thing. I used that word. I don't know where I don't know if that's like from those little books or something. I think that might be a character, right? One of those kids' books. Anyways.
I don't know. Dr. Zeus maybe created it. I don't know. It's a good one.
And I sort of said, like, because there's definitely races are not always going to go as planned. And sure, if someone asks you and you honestly want to tell them, okay, no, it didn't go ideal. But then after a few sentences or a bit of time, like, just let it go. Just drop it and move on. And I know a lot of coaches and people on podcasts or whatever, they'll talk about how, like, the benefit of a bad race is like there's so much learning that can be done. And I totally agree. I think you can learn so much from when races go wrong, but you can also learn from when races go really well. Like, I don't think you can only say that you learn when things go badly, because when a race goes well, then you think, okay, these steps that I took, this training, this nutrition, this is something I would do again. And then if it goes horribly wrong, then you're trying to figure out which piece of the puzzle was what contributed to it. Sometimes it's totally out of your control, and sometimes it's very within your control, and then you would try and modify that. But the same thing is, whether you're going to intellectualize it or not, you have your emotions, you deal with whether you're like sad or happy or elated. And then once you've like past that point, then you can look at it in the next days, 2 weeks, a little more objectively, maybe pick your top 3 things that you would do again and then things that you would change, and then use that. So next time, change how you train or how you approach the race or how you fuel during it or whatever. So that you're actually making use of the challenges that you've had before to become more experienced. And so I think, you can learn a lot from other people too. You don't have to necessarily reinvent the wheel entirely yourself when you start training or racing, but everyone's a little bit different. So what works for one person won't necessarily work for you. So you do your best to ask friends, read books, however you like to gather your knowledge and base, talk to your coach or
listen to podcasts.
Oh yeah, listen to podcasts.
Of
and
course.
then like, tailor it for your physiology, your mentality and all that sort of stuff.
Do you enjoy the racing side or adventurous side of being outdoors more?
Both. I think, I don't know. I really like both. I love racing, but I also just like going for, like, my idea of, it was going to sound really antisocial, but to me, one of the most fun things in the world of running would be to go to a place that I've never been before with a map by myself and have like 10 hours to go run in a fitness base where I could actually complete whatever type of mission I've dreamed up and then just go figure it out. And then if I were to be able to perfect that, then I'd want to, in the days or weeks later, go find friends and then bring them there. I don't know how to explain that, but I like to suss something out myself. I like the kind of, I don't know, the lack of safety net of like going out somewhere on your own and trying to piece it all together. And that little bit of adrenaline you get when it's like, maybe you're lost, or maybe you're not going to get home, or maybe you're running out of time, or do you have enough food? I try to be fairly prepared and not put myself in precarious situations, because definitely one of the most mortifying things in my mind is having to be rescued out of wherever I've gone running. That I would obviously call for help if I got myself into that situation, but I would feel really sheepish.
Yes, please do. If you're ever in that situation, just call someone, Anne-Marie.
Call for help. Call early.
Properly.
That is one thing. That's like a work phrase. Call for help and call early.
So I mean, it's kind of like baking bread. You're always going to try baking a good loaf of bread before you take it to a dinner party. Like you're not gonna.
Are you?
Yes, I mean, of course, you're not gonna like.
I don't know if everyone's gonna trial it first.
Trust me, you're not gonna. It's not gonna be like 10 a.m. It's like, I've got dinner at 6 o'clock. I'm going over to Janice's house. I'm gonna bake some bread, and you like put in 2 hours of bread baking, and the next thing you know, you turn up to Janice's house with a flat loaf of flat, untasty flour that's kind of dry as a biscuit.
But if you're a professional baker, you might just wing it. But if you're a complete neophyte, then you won't.
Jeez. All right. Well, next time you know of a professional baker, let them know that I need to be their friend, okay? Because it's going to help me out in life.
We have an amazing bakery like 400 meters from the door here, and they make the best sourdough bread. So I don't even try and make my own. All these people currently on Instagram or whatever with their sourdough starter. No, I just go to the bakery. We used to live in a very, very, very cold cabin, and I did try and have my sourdough starter, but it kept like freezing and dying. And even if I put it by the fire, then the fire would eventually go out in the late parts of the night. And then I was hopeless. So I baked bread every day, but it was not sourdough.
That sounds like a radical place to live. Where was that?
It was amazing. It was in Victoria, which is on Vancouver Island. So it's like a ferry ride away from here. And it was like a very drafty old cabin that we would live in from September till kind of April or May. And then the family who owned it would kick us out and they'd come and stay there for the summer as their summer cabin. And we were leaving anyways to go tree planting for the summer. So we kind of just did that system.
You went tree planting for a summer?
well, I think for like half a decade, but yeah, like in the summers, I mean, I don't know if it's that common, but certainly a lot of uh, British Columbians will have heard of tree planting. So it's basically reforestation. So you put seedlings that are like about, I don't know, that big, like hundreds of them in these planting bags, and then you hike through the block and you have your shovel and you plant them at a set distance apart from each other. And you kind of do that for a few months, living in a camp or trailers or sometimes a motel.
It's amazing. That's like you're like rebuilding the natural world.
I mean, it sounds really amazing when you're saying it like that. And I wish that it was entirely perfect. The sad thing is, the reason the forest is gone is because the forestry company cut all the trees down. And then the more you look into it, the more you realize we're planting like a monoculture of trees that are not necessarily destined for eternal growth on this. They're probably going to be cut down in another 60 years or something tragic like that. So yeah, you're, doing a wonderful thing, but at the end of the day, it's sort of still part of our society's need for wood products or what have you.
Toilet paper, I believe, is where that mostly
Oh
goes.
My gosh. Oh, yeah, I'm running low.
Is that where your incredible knowledge about plant and flora comes from?
Well, we saw a lot of megafauna. Like you'd see big animals and stuff when, like, bears and cougars and stuff like that. But the block was pretty bare, so a lot of my kind of like plant, smaller birds, all that sort of stuff, knowledge is more just kind of come through hiking or running and like learning about it from books and stuff like that.
Because like following your Instagram is so funny. You're like, oh yeah, hey look, I think I saw like a toothy fungi, a Drehemo combatino fratrino, and you use its botanical name, and it's like totally not what I just said. But it's like, whoa, Anne-Marie's like scientist as well. That's right.
Yeah, but I like when I see that jelly tooth fungus, I don't necessarily know the Latin name. Like I have to go home and comb through a bunch of books and probably make some misidentifications. Actually, to be honest, the modern world has changed all of that. I have probably actually like right behind there, I have a bunch of books. Now they have apps where you just take a photo and, some computer algorithm identifies your lichen based on the photo and tells you like the top 10 most likely lichen or whatever.
That's rad.
Yeah.
They also do that with people now. Like any photo.
Your faces. Yeah. Facial recognition. We can't go anywhere. I know.
No, they are looking at you through photos that you don't even know exist. That's what's going down. Hey, Anne-Marie, you said before that, in your evolution of as a runner and becoming a little bit better at running, you call upon friends or people who run. And I remember it was a while ago now, and I spoke about this when I did the podcast with Dylan Bowman. That I was sitting there, having a cup of Java, and I received a message from you over in Canada. I think it was, Vancouver. And your message was, your message went along the lines of, Dylan is giving the most incredible speech right now. You would be so proud. And I wanted to know what it was that you were witness to that night that made you feel that way more so, and also send the message.
Yeah, so Gary Robbins, Ellie Greenwood, and Dylan Bowman had all come together to give a talk in Vancouver. And I'm going to paraphrase because I don't know what the exact title was, but it was sort of maybe perseverance through challenges or, something along those lines that they were each going to speak to. And if I'm going to be totally honest, I have not gone to that many like running talks necessarily. So I kind of wanted to go because I adore all three of those people, but I didn't really know necessarily what to expect. And you kind of think it's going to be especially running based because they're all runners. But yeah, like Dylan just went up there and came to a place that he probably obviously knew a few of us, and then spoke to an enormous auditorium full of hundreds of strangers and basically walked us all through the last 3 years of his life. And speaking about obviously his running successes and also his challenges, which was kind of what I was expecting. But then he just took the next step and really delved deeper into, I think, both the like psychological impact of injuries on your body, but also of your mental space on your physical state. And it was so honest and it seemed so brave. And I think you looked around and everyone was just, I think, really touched by this talk that he was giving. And it resonated with every person there, whether they personally had, gone through really tough times in their lives, whether they wouldn't necessarily like label it depression or not, or anxiety or what have you. It doesn't sort of matter how formalized you're going to, label it, or whether they've supported someone, one of their friends, or watched family members go through the same thing. It was just really touching. And then to see, and like, Dylan can like talk to this at the end. You can call him up and he can correct me if I'm wrong. But I think he specifically said, I don't think it's because I was injured that I became sort of down or a bit depressed or sad. Like, I think I was sad and therefore I had some of these physical manifestations. Like, I don't want to paint the picture that I became injured and that made me have a crummy year, and I think a lot of runners have had injuries, and certainly that's not been the highlight month or year of their life, and they find it frustrating and really challenging. But to go to the next step and say, there's been a time in my life when, for either no good explanation or very tangible explanations, I was down, and my physical being felt that way. I think is so important for people to hear. And I don't know, like, because when you're feeling good, if you go for a run, you feel even better. And if you're feeling medium and you go for a run, you feel even, you feel good. But I wouldn't say I've had periods in my life where I've been depressed, but I've certainly had days where, like, I was super stressed, like really stressed. And it's like, you think, oh, I'll run home from work or I'll go for a run and I'll feel better. But it's like, it's so that at that specific hour, it's so intense that like, you can't even run. Like and then not only, it's not like you went for a run and then all your worries faded away and you came home and like, you were totally not stressed. It was like, no, not only do I feel really stressed about this thing, I went and tried to have a run and I couldn't even do my workout or couldn't even get through my easy run. And then now I feel like I've failed at my run and I'm still worried about this thing. And so it's easy for those of us who run when we're feeling great and feel even better to tell someone when they're depressed or when they're really anxious or they're having it, like, oh, just go for a run and it makes everything better. But it's not always the case and it's not always easier. And I 100% think if you have activity and sport and being in nature as an important part of your life, it will get you through things easier than if you don't. And I think it's really important for all of us to do it if we can. But it's not the only solution. And we also need to take the next step of like, okay, so why do I feel this way? Or, dig deeper and don't only use our exercise or our connection with nature as our only tool for self-repair or for coping, I guess. It has to be one tool, but it can't be the only thing that we have.
So in saying that, do you mean more along the lines of, like reaching out to someone who may specialize in that area and someone that may like be able to provide a kind of like a different perspective on what you may be going through and kind of educate you in in a light that you may not even be aware of? Like, what is the recommendation there if running and getting out to nature is just one aspect of it? What other things are available to people?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. If someone's, feeling really down, and more than just for like an hour in the evening, like it's something that's become more common than not for them to be feeling that way. I think you want to talk to your loved ones, your support network, but also sometimes when these things go on and on and on, then like the support network can become burdened as well, especially if they're not feeling like they're able to fix the problem. We all get frustrated if we're not able to repair the issues. So then I would say, yeah, like reach out to your physician or counselor, or if there's, other health professionals that are around someone, and it may be medications, but a lot of time it's not. It's just having someone who can listen to you, provide people with tools on whether it's like stress management or behavioral modifications, or just getting to the root of what started all this. Like, do you need to make a big life change, or is it just something that's occurred right now and will pass, or it's recurrent and it ebbs and flows? Each person's going to be so different in what they go through. And sometimes our emotions are entirely appropriate. Like maybe you've just gone through a really terrible trauma or a huge loss, and that feeling of like sadness or apathy or anger, frustration is not wrong. Maybe you just need someone to tell you that it's okay to feel that way and that it's not going to last forever, but that there's a very, I don't know, not clear. It never probably feels clear to people, but that there's sort of like an anticipated progression through a different set of emotions when someone's just gone through something tragic or what have you. There's light at the end of the tunnel kind of thing.
Yeah, you said that really, really well. There is every need to feel every emotion that we feel at certain points. And, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing that is broken within you if you feel a certain emotion that is difficult to process at that time. And again, I think it's one of those things that, in society, it's like, you have to be happy. You should be happy. You should feel this way. You should feel grateful. And yes, they have there's points where that is the case, but at the same time, we're all just human. And, we need to feel sad, and we need to feel the whole range of emotions that we can, because we're human. Like that's part of our job as well. Without being Debbie Downer all the time.
Yeah, no Debbie Downer.
No Debbie Downer, but that's more to do with racing than it is about life,
Yeah.
So we try our best. Anne-Marie, I just want to say thanks a lot, mate, for taking the time. I kind of contacted you a little bit kind of out of the blue, almost last minute. I was like, hang on a second, why have I not reached out to Anne-Marie and asked if she wanted to do a podcast? Because she'd be a freaking amazing guest. And you are. And so thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to have a chat.
Yeah, it's great to catch up, hey? Look, I hope everything with everything that's coming up soon with work and things like that is manageable, and sounds like you've got a great team, and no doubt you are part of that great team that you do speak of. So I'm sure they appreciate you as much as you appreciate them. And we appreciate you because you're Anne-Marie and you perk everyone's day up because you're a legend.
Well, thanks for podcasting. Now I can listen to you and all the interesting people you find.
Yeah.
About fascinating things.
Yes. I mean, we haven't spoken about the toothless fungi yet, but I'm glad we covered that topic. I've been meaning to.
Yeah, on the to-do list.
Hey, all right. Well, thanks a lot, mate.
All right. Take care.
So thanks for listening, everyone. I really hope you got something out of that. If you did, and you feel like someone else might get something out of it, then please share it and, start a conversation about one of the topics we covered in the chat. So again, I just want to thank Anne-Marie, and I really hope everything is going well out in Canada. And I hope everyone is doing well wherever they are right now, because it's pretty turbulent times, and I just feel like it's there's a lot of uncertainty around it as well, which kind of adds to the inability to see where there's a light at the end of the tunnel. But there surely is a light at the end of the tunnel with all of this COVID-19 situation going on. So yeah, take care of yourselves, keep well, and like I said, share it, or if not, then just start a conversation of your own. I hope this sparks a little bit of motivation to do that, because that's what it's all about, maintaining the art of conversation. So until next time, keep well, keep enjoying yourself, keep safe, and we look forward to hearing what you think. Thanks a lot.